And I'm John Davis.
Welcome to Spirit Cafe.
Come in, sit down, and
grab a cup of love.
A Spirituality Without the Guilt podcast.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I have another guest. This is John. What is your last name again?
Davis, John Davis.
John Davis. One day I'll remember that. I have. He occupies two YouTube channels. One is John of New. And the other one, of course, if you have seen my last video with Tamra, this is her counterpart with Tamra, who they do Spirit Cafe, where they invite quite a few readers and spiritual talk. And it's just a very enjoyable YouTube channel to go visit. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to him. Please tell us, what is it exactly that you do, and how can they get a hold of you, and where to get a hold of you?
Okay. All right. So on Spirit Cafe, it's Tamra Zoner and I. We do a podcast based around spirituality without the guilt or dogma of religion. And so it's just us talking about spirituality and having fun, bringing on guests who we think are interesting and talented, much like yourself. And we bring them on and we have free conversations without any anything. We just get them on there and say, let's talk about your life, talk about your journey, and let's have fun and laugh while we do it. And so that's Spirit Cafe. On John of New, I actually dive into deep spiritual topics and the meaning behind ancient texts and Bible and the Quran. And I dive into a whole bunch of other things, but I also mainly talk about a very specific past life I had in a long time ago, which I'll share that in a minute. And then to get a hold of me is really easy. It's johnofnew.com, or on YouTube, I just search John of New, all one word, JOHNOFNEW, and you will find over 200 videos on there from my channel.
Yes, and they're very enjoyable. I watch them often. So
thank you.
I definitely, yes, go over there and do that. So I have a few questions for you as we go into this. So the first question is, what journey have you taken to end up in the metaphysical lifestyle?
Well, that is an interesting question because I was very not into the metaphysical lifestyle when I was younger. I was raised as a good Catholic boy, and now I consider myself a recovering one of those. But I look at my life from the perspective of I was raised as a Catholic by a woman who had her master's degree in liturgy, head of liturgical doctrine of her church. And if you don't know what that means when the priest does a sermon, he had to pass it by my mom before he actually said it on the pulpit, to make sure it matched the church doctrine. So that's how Catholic we were.
You go, girl.
Yeah, she was so Catholic, we called her St. Joan. But when I turned 18, she gave me the greatest gift she could ever give me. And she said, John, spirituality is a personal journey. You need to find out what you truly believe. So I started studying everything. And when I say studying everything, I mean, I traveled all over the world, India, Egypt, Israel, Greece, Jordan. I've been to over 30 countries in the world, just doing studies and travel. I went to Peru and all that. But the coolest part about my life at that time was I was doing Renaissance festivals as a comedy sword fighting comedian. And I was at a party one night at one of the festivals, and a woman kept staring at me from across the room. And I thought, this is kind of weird, because I knew her husband was sitting right beside her. And she kept staring at me. She walked over to me and she says, you walked with Jesus in a past life. And I was like, okay, lady, you're whacked. You're crazy. And I was like, no way. But it was interesting. So I found out she was a psychic reader, and I set up a reading with her. And the next session was really profound for me. As she started speaking, I started realizing it was true, what she was saying. And then it freaked me out. So I went off and I did I just kind of blew that off as a weird experience, and I went on with my way. And then the next person who told me about that past life, I was sitting on a bench at the Renaissance Festival, and a woman I knew who I did not know was psychic at all. She was actually another performer. She says, "You know, you were John the Beloved in the past life, right?" Well, long story short, a total of 19 different psychics spontaneously walked up to me out of the blue and told me. In fact, one of them, I was in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I was walking along at a holistic fair because a friend of mine was selling jewelry at the fair. I was there visiting, and I was walking past the row of readers, and one lady stopped her reading and came out and left the person at the table, came out and said, you know, you're John the Beloved, right? So after all these psychics told me, my Catholic brain kicked in and said, you can't listen to psychics. It's against the rules, right? So I said, I got to find a more scientific approach. So I decided to search for a certified past life regression therapist. And I found a wonderful woman in Washington, D.C., who did a full hypno-regression on me. And I remembered meeting and walking with Jeshua ben Joseph. That was I called him Jeshua. And I remember his wife, who he called Ishti, which I found out later on was an Aramaic word for wife, but he said it in such a cute way. It was kind of a fun relationship. Mary Magdalene was the wife. I remembered all sorts of his teachings. I remembered so many different things. And then at one point in the regression, she says, how would you feel about seeing his death? And it was a mistake the regressionist made. She said she actually meant to lead me to the death of John, but she didn't realize to John in that life, there was nothing more important than Jeshua. And so I went and in my first regression witnessed the crucifixion. Ooh. And you hear me in my regression screaming and wailing. And she had to actually, using hypnosis, take me out of my emotional state to get me back into the room. And hypnosis is a very weird thing because on a very rare occasion, the person who's regressed, the channel will be left open. After the regression, I was one of the few people who had the channel left open. I was having memories that were coming through spontaneously. And what also happened was somebody would ask me a question and I would have spontaneous memories of that past life again. And I was remembering all kinds of things about Jeshua's personal life and the teachings. And that led me to a very interesting place because I was getting all this information and I really felt it was interesting to share this information to the world. And I really wanted everyone to hear it because it was so different from Christianity and so much more based in a loving world and love in general and your own pathway within yourself to that love. And so I started figuring out how I could do it. And a book was eventually written about me called John of Old, John of New. It's still available on Amazon right now. I don't get a dime off of that book. That was written by the first reader who read for me.
What was the name of it again?
It's called John of Old, John of New by Sharon Prince. It's The Awakening of an Apostle.
Okay.
And it's on Amazon. And that book is from her perspective, what happened with us. I decided I really wanted to get out there and start speaking and sharing these teachings. And so I ended up speaking at the Edgar Cayce Foundation, or the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which is the Edgar Cayce Foundation, in Virginia Beach and Houston and Portland, and Unity churches and metaphysical centers all over the country. And what happened was I discovered that rather than hearing what I was trying to teach them about their own personal divinity and the God being love and how to connect with that love, all the people could get focused on was who I was in a past life. And so the past life became a detriment to the teachings themselves. And so I decided it was not right of me to do that because it's not about who I was, because I believe that reincarnation itself, that I don't understand what it is. So, I don't know whether I'm tapping into memories that are just in the oneness of God that we all could tap into or what, but I know that it doesn't really matter who I was. It only matters who I am, as with any of us. And so I decided I needed to leave that work. And I ended up leaving that work over a decade ago. And then about 5 months ago, well, actually more than that, because it was over a year now, I met Tamara Zoner, my co-host or my cohort in crime, or my compatriot of compassion, as we'd call her, on another channel, on a Spirit Cafe. But I met her, and there was something about her that was so open and comforting when I met her, that I just felt completely compelled to tell her my entire story, which is a story I hadn't spoken about in almost a decade. I'd stopped sharing the story because it was I didn't think it was a good idea. And she's like, well, there's a reason why you're telling me this, let's get you back out there. And so I was like, well, I'm thinking about it. She said, well, we'll get you through that, because she's an amazing individual. And then Tamara and I interviewed Kim Carey from Intuitive View. And we finished that conversation, and Kim's like, so tell me about this past life. And as I had mentioned reincarnation in our interview, and I ended up blurting everything out to her too. And then she said, let's get you on and do an interview about reincarnation. She says, you can share as much or as little as you'd like. And I was like, okay. So I went in and I checked in with my own source, and because that's how I go through life, is I'm constantly checking in with source, and basically it said it's time to come back out again. So I set up the YouTube channel that I have now. I set up a website, and I had the interview with Kim, and it went live on September 10th. And then it was so beautiful, because all the responses I were getting were like exactly what I wanted to hear 10 years before. People wanting to dive into the lessons and the teachings and find their own personal divinity and their own personal power. And it's so really fascinating to me is the fact that, 10, 15 years ago, the whole society was at a very different place. Humanity was a different place. And you can see the raising consciousness that's happening right now, that it's huge, it's drastic, and it's so beautiful to watch. And so I'm very happily back doing the work again. In 4 months' time, I've put up over 200 videos, and the channel already has 3,000 subscribers, and we're doing great. And but it's so great because we've created a community where they ask questions, and every video I do, almost every video I do, is an answer to a question someone's brought to the channel. And not only that, but underneath those videos, the questions and the comments below have turned into a nice, beautiful community of people going down their own journey. And there's the interesting thing is there's no judgment on that channel. Somebody comes in who is judgy or harsh, I ban them, because it has to be has to be a safe place. Has to be exactly. You have to get rid of them, right?
Yeah.
It has to be a safe place. And my response to them is always, this is a place of love, and we don't do fear-based things here. And I just kick them out, right?
Yeah.
But but the interesting thing, I've only had to kick out a few. Almost everybody is so open and loving, from all different perspectives, religious perspectives too. They're all very open and loving.
But that's awesome. I have quite a few. So, doing political things, you get trolls. It's not like I'm kicking out our community. It's you get the Trumpers and So,
right.
Well, that's a beautiful story. Let's go to question number 2, which I'm excited about as well. So, do you have any mentors, your favorite teachers?
In my life, my favorite teacher, besides, of course, the past life one, is my mom. My mom was amazing, because I'll tell you an interesting thing about my mom. Though she was so devoutly Catholic, she believed in being a spiritual person. And one time I asked her, Mom, why did you become so Catholic? And she said, because I had an out-of-body experience during a mass. And so she almost became a nun because of it. But the thing that we found out is after her death, we found out all of the things that she was doing that she never told anybody she was doing. And that story lays into when she was much older, I ran into a friend of mine, and we were talking, and in the middle of the conversation, he says, your mom's an angel. I said, excuse me? He says, yeah, well, let me tell you a story. He says, you're Catholic and I'm Catholic, and you had 7 kids. We had 8 kids in our family. He says, and my father, I knew his father. His father was crippled up with severe arthritis, couldn't work, was out of work. And the mother was working 2 jobs. One of them was my bus driver for school. And when I was a kid, and one day she brought the entire family together and sat them down at a table. And she said, we're out of money and we're out of food. I have no idea where our next meal is even coming from. She said, let's just pray. And so their family prayed. And he said, John, he says, we finished the prayer and there was a knock on the door. And my mom went and got the door, and your mom walked in carrying bags of groceries. He said she brought in 4 loads of groceries. And then she went back out to the car and brought in the freshly cooked roast she had just made.
Wow.
And set it on the counter. We had no idea. And then I heard story after story of all these things that she was doing without saying a word. And then I thought back, when my great uncle got Alzheimer's, there was no question. He moved into our house and we took care of him until it was no longer possible. Right. When my aunt came back from Peru from a broken marriage with 3 kids, they had nothing. She was one of the first Peace Corps. My aunt was one of the first Peace Corps people. She showed up in America with nothing on their backs and 3 young kids. So my first thing we did was no question. They're living with us. They moved in with us, and we.
Well, 3 more kids weren't going to make a difference.
Right, exactly.
I'm 6 out of 7. We know you just absorb.
Right, exactly. But it's like there was no question she was going to do that work. She was always going to do the loving thing. So she's my biggest spiritual mentor.
Oh, fantastic. I'm just enjoying your story. So forgive me if I have to switch a little bit.
You take your time. You do what you got to do.
So the other question that I have was, what was your most painful lesson?
Oh, it's a good one. You're going to love it. When I was a young man in my early 20s, I wanted to be a stuntman and a fight director. That was my goal. And I was well on the way. I was working towards my black belt in karate, and I was well on the way. I was already working with fight directors. At 22 years old, a buddy of mine said, hey, can you help me unload my van? And I said, sure. So I went over to his house and I climbed up in his van because I was like, at that time I was buff. I had long Fabio hair in those days, as opposed to this Telly Savalas crap. All right.
So you were going through your sexy John stage. Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely. I was a tight wearing man. So
Woo!
I was doing word fights and stuff. Try not to visualize. Anyway. So I was all buff, and this guy asked me to help him unload his van. And all I kept thinking was just another workout. So I went out to his house and I climbed up in his van, and he was a professional potter. His van was filled with 80-pound boxes of clay. So I picked up the first box and I turned to set it outside of the van. Oh. And when I turned and twisted, my spine broke in half.
Oh.
And my upper spine separated from my lower spine. And they picked me up. They took me to the hospital. They told me that I had spina bifida occulta, which was 3 of my vertebrae never formed properly at birth. And with the extra weight and the twisting, my spine broke. And the doctor says, John, you will probably never walk again. And if you do, there's no way you'll ever have a physical career because your back can't handle it. So start thinking about a sedentary career right now. So I'm lying in that hospital bed, and I guess the Irish part of me popped up, because I was like, well, no, hey, I'm not going to do that now. Right? So I got my Irish in there.
Yeah. Who did you tell me to do what? Yeah.
Right. I decided, well, I came to the belief that, because at this point I was already studying spirituality. I was already deep into a lot of philosophies. And I decided that if I took his belief, the doctor's belief, that I'd be living his life and not my own. So I decided I'm going to take my own belief and I'm going to become a stuntman. And so that day I started with the upper part of my neck, and that day I made a successful present moment. I made that moment as successful as it could be. I moved my neck, then I moved my shoulders. And over the course of 30 days, I went down my back. And before the end of the month, I was able to flex my hips and I had mobility back. And then over the next 6 months, I worked my way back up to walking. At a year, I was back to what I would call a normal body, But a year and 6 months, I was back up to lifting the same amount of weights in the gym that I was before, going for my black belt. And I went to a workshop, climbed up on a 3-story tower, and jumped off into a fall pad. And then after that, I did over 4,000 live comedy sword fighting stunt shows all over the world, including the front lines of Iraq and Afghanistan. I worked in movies with Brad Pitt and David Duchovny. I've done stunts. I've worked with the guys who did Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Highlander. And I've had a very physical, very fun, and amazing career that was very physical after they told me I never would.
Wow. That is incredible. Well, and the painful lesson was that the lesson in that was that I love that part where you said, I'm going to live his life and not mine.
Right.
And that was that healing moment where we know that we can take control. Control is a loose term I use over what our lives can and should look like.
Right. Well, we are the creator of our experience. And one of the main universal truths is that our thoughts create. I mean, Buddha said, what you think you become, you create your world. And Krishna said, you are the culmination of your thought. And Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. And the Bible says, as a man thinketh, so is he. Even Shakespeare said, I think nothing good nor bad, but thinking makes it so. So
true.
I could take his thoughts or I could take my thoughts. And the cool part about that is you get to choose your thoughts because you're the creator of your experience.
I 100% agree about that. And I always tell everybody, be careful. Don't touch that thought. You don't know where it's been. You just let it pass right on by.
That's lovely. That's lovely. Yeah.
And you grab your own.
Well, the toughest part is realizing that, Moses said God's name is I am. And then Jesus said, whatever you ask in God's name is granted. But 85 to 90% of our day is in our subconscious belief. And we say terrible things about ourselves all day long, and we use words like wanting, needing, hoping, and trying, which create nothing. So changing your perspective about what you're doing in the only moment you have, because your past is just a collection of present moment memories, and your future is just a place where you set goals for your next present moment. Your job is to stay very present and stay very creative and live a loving life. And that way you can put it in your subconscious belief behind you and start living that life on autopilot.
I 100% agree.
Yeah. I'm glad. I'm good.
Yeah. Well, those are hard lessons that you get to, though. I mean, it's, how can I put this in words? Hard lessons. They don't have to be hard. I remember somebody telling me, like, Sheila, they can be as easy or as hard as you want them to be. And I went, what? You mean I can have easy ones?
Right. Yeah. Well, what's funny is, one of the biggest things that I bump into with clients in my private sessions that I do is there's a predominant belief out there that struggle equals growth. And I'm why are you focusing on struggle? I've probably done more in my life than most of you. And that's all. It's always been easy. I've done, it's always been easy. Yes, my back broke. Was that hard? Sure. But the singular moments of flexing my neck were not hard. The hardest moment in that process was flexing the hips. But once I got past that, then it was all uphill, or actually downhill from there. Downhill from there.
Wow. Okay. So the next question is, what was your most joyous lesson?
My most joyous lesson actually came in many ways that, how do I say this? Well, let me share an epiphany moment with you. It was one of the moments that changed me dramatically in life. This was even before my regression. I grew up with a father who was a plumber, and he had all the trappings of a Southern Delaware kind of guy. He was a racist, and he was a homophobic, and he had all those things. And I was very much being trained down that same route because I was his son. 19 years old, I walked into a convenience store, and the cashier gave me $5 too much change. And I'm walking out to the car and I'm looking at it. I'm like, wait a minute. And I walked back in. I said, I'm sorry, you gave me $5 too much. And I handed it back. And the next guy in line says, well, there's something you don't see every day, an honest person. And I felt this rush of pure loving energy hit my body. And I walked out. And like I said, this was long before my regression and even the first psychic had told me. I walked out and I'm feeling this. I'm like, Jesus, is that you? It's like I recognized that feeling. And because when you hear my regression, when the man walked up to you, you could feel his presence.
Oh.
You literally could feel his presence. It's the same thing when I met Tamara, same thing. I could feel her presence. But what happened was that day I experienced that loving sensation. I said, Jesus, is that you? And then I felt it again and it swelled. And what happened was that day, I literally overnight stopped being racist, stopped being homophobic, found a whole new loving experience. And it was like a moment of true epiphany. And it didn't help my relationship with my father. Let me tell you that. From that point on, we were at odds, and it was not good.
Right. But you had it sounds like the story that you're telling, as I'm listening to it, it says that somebody gave you a label and you said, yeah, I can do that.
Absolutely. In both of these stories, the labels, I grew up with a parent will always tell the child what they're supposed to believe.
Yeah.
That's why I was so blessed with my mom, is because through my whole life, we were raised Catholic, but at 18, she said, spirituality is a personal journey, go find out what you truly believe. So that was a gift to me from her.
Yeah.
This moment that I'm talking about now was a gift from something greater. And it literally changed me in an instant. And the second and it was not about somebody changing me or God changing me or Jesus changing me. It was about feeling that unconditional love that we're all supposed to have.
Right.
And realize, and there's a quote in the book of John that says, no fear can exist in perfect love. And that's what happened to me. Because all homophobia, all racism is a fear. It's a fear. And when I experienced that unconditional perfect love, those fears couldn't exist in me anymore. And so,
right.
And that's why I call that my most joyous moment, because that was really the moment where I experienced that unconditional love. And I had a very conditionally loving experience in my house with my father. From early on, I was always a little different. When I was a kid, I had imaginary friends. Now I look back and I remember them. I can see them. I had experiences. My brother would tell me that I'd be lying in bed perfectly still, and then I would just start saying, hey, I'm on the ceiling. I'm taller than all of you. I'm up here. He was explaining a child having an out-of-body experience. So I was having all these huge experiences when I was kids, not remembering any of them, but they were just very normal. And then over the course of the years, my father, who was not like me, kind of singled me out as the one to pick on. And, he was an alcoholic abuser, and I was the one, know, and it's so fascinating because even today I look back as, without that experience of him, I wouldn't have become the most independent person I am. And I wouldn't have been able to grow without that, because my truest belief is God is love. And we are here to experience what it feels like to be separate from that love so that we can know that love more fully, because you can't know or experience anything without having a baseline to measure against. Without feeling the opposite, you don't know what love really feels like. So you have to have that separation and that lower vibration to understand what that higher vibration is and what it feels like.
Oh, absolutely. Ironically, I was also taught how to not be who I am.
Mm.
And that was the household. We don't talk about it much, but there's a lot of us are coming out and saying, yeah, I was raised to be racist. I was raised to be judgmental. I was raised to be this. And I was like, and I remember at a young age too, in this religion that I was in, and they said that, black man can't hold the priesthood. And I remember being 6 or 7 years old going, why not? What's wrong with this whole thing? At such a young age, I'm like, this is not right.
Right. I believe people like you, especially, who is so open. When you were on our YouTube channel, I was so impressed with the fact that you use multiple modalities, because it's not about the modalities, it's about the connection.
Right.
And to me, it was so fascinating to talk to you, and I felt really connected to what you're saying, because I believed what you were saying. And when we're kids, the first 7 years of our life, everything is dictated by what people that we respect or are supposed to respect say and tell us.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's why the Catholic Church, when they baptize children, they get them before they can think, because in the Catholic faith, they say when a child is born, they're born in sin, and they can't even go to heaven. And so I find a parent and I say, let me ask you a question. When your child was born and you held your baby for the first time, did you look at it and see a horrible, wretched sinner? Did you say, ooh, you're such a wretched sinner? Or did you just feel that swelling love of a parent for a child? I said, that's not that you were told by the faith to believe there's sin in your hands.
Right.
And so you can't take the beliefs. You have to take your own belief, because if you and find out what you truly believe. That's the coolest thing, is that on my channel, when I talk about things, I don't judge anybody for what they believe. Right. And if they say something fearful or harmful, I address it. But I had a man come on the other day with Jehovah's Witness, and he says, I feel when I watched your video that you're a caring person and a loving person. And I think you're probably a good person, but I think you're deluded. And he says, I think that this, and I really feel compelled to save you.
Yeah.
And then he said, I know that I'll probably be attacked. I'll probably be attacked by people on your site. I said, you know what? If they attack you, I'll block them.
Yeah.
Because you're coming from your heart, and you're coming from love. And I can't judge you for that. I respect your beliefs. And each one of us is supposed to find our own path.
Yeah, but doesn't it get you sometime you think I'm the one that's deluded?
Well, it's funny. When you tell people that you remember the life of an apostle, they come out of the woodwork sometimes.
Right. They do.
But let me tell you this. I have never had a Muslim attack me, a Jewish person attack me, a Baha'i faith attack me, a Wicca, or any other New Ager attack me. It has always been Christians, and they've always been vehement and harsh. And so I'm like, I have to remind myself, first of all, that Jeshua was not Christian.
Correct.
And I go back to the famous Gandhi quote, I love your Jesus, I don't like your Christians.
Right.
It's a perfect quote.
Exactly. And this is not to offend anybody who has any of those religions whatsoever.
Absolutely not.
We're just speaking our own truth and our own experiences. And if you have something similar, then you can relate to us. If not, we're not trying to,
absolutely
offend
not.
you or anything.
You can find God. There's a famous quote in the Bible, in my Father's house, there are many mansions. Mm-hmm. And in those mansions are the various schools of thought that bring you to God. I think that you can come to God from many different angles, and it is not a judgment on anybody's belief system, because as Mom said, spirituality is a personal journey. You find your own personal truth. Don't have it dictated to you.
I agree. Absolutely. Well, you kind of completed the last question was, what is your idea of a higher God, a higher power, or God? So you kind of answered that question for us. So, but thank you, John. Thank you so much. This has been so fascinating. I am so thankful I did this. Mind is open. And now I want to interview you about all the famous people you met, because I really want to know the tea on them. But that's a whole nother video.
Well, I'll give you one thing. Most of them are shorter than you think they are.
they all have to wear high heels.
They're high heels and lifts in the shoes with the high heels.
That's good to know.
Yeah. Whenever you see a full body shot, look at the boots, and you'll see the heel, and then you'll notice all the leather above that heel And it's like there's about another inch or so. There's one particular actor, initials BP. I mentioned him earlier. His IMDb says he's 6 foot tall, and I would bet you he's 5'9".
Wow.
Because I'm 6'1" and I towered over him.
Yep. Isn't that funny? Yeah. That's a little interesting stuff to learn. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this. What an incredible story. And yeah, thank you. I would love to have you back to do other stuff.
Anytime. And one of the things I do, Sheila, for when I go do an interview like this is I do private sessions. And if somebody wants a discount on that, I give your listeners a discount on. I'll share that link with you.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah, just email that to me, or
I will
text it to me, or however you get it to me, and I'll put it in.
I'll get it to you, I promise.
Yep. And all of the websites and all of that are also going to be underneath this video. I usually put it in 2 places, one in the comments and then one underneath this video where I have my own personal comments. So
great.
I'll put it there. Alrighty. And do you want to, let's take, is there anything lasting thought or saying or anything that you would like to take us out with?
Yes. Realize that you only live in one moment, and your one moment is the important thing. It's the only moment you have thought, word, and deed. It's the only moment you can do anything creatively. Make your one moment as positive and loving as you possibly can. Then everything else will take care of itself. Because by creating this, anything that's in alignment with that loving life will come into your experience. And then that same thing, that loving experience, will be dropped into your subconscious belief. And then your life gets easier and easier and easier.
Oh, what a wonderful note to leave out on. So thank you. Thank you, everyone.